see that there are a few people that are coming in. All right, so welcome to our webinar. I'm managing your course in myCourses. My name is Teddy Quintoro, and I'm here today with my colleague Barbara Stechison. So we are both learning technology consultants with teaching and learning services. And also joining us today is Adam Finkelstein and Carolyn Samuel. I'll skip the title for the time being, there are two. And they will be moderating, Carolyn will be moderating the chat during our session. So there are a few items I would like to bring to your attention before we begin. This session is being recorded, so if you prefer not to be visible, you can turn off your video so that you don't appear in the recording. But we also, if you don't mind, we also do appreciate seeing you as well, so we're talking to an audience, but either or. Also, the slides for this webinar and the recording, as well as additional resources, will be posted on the TLS website. And also, please note that you have been muted upon entry for the duration of the webinar. Barbara and I will be answering your questions at the end of the session. We have set 10 minutes aside at the end of this. However, feel free to use a chat while we are presenting if you'd like to type in any questions, and our moderator, Carolyn, will be happy to address your questions there. And if she can't answer, we'll definitely try to answer it at the end as well. So we'll be covered. So without further ado, we'll take a look at the session outcomes. So today we'll be looking at design your homepage with purpose to enhance the course experience. We'll also take a look at identify strategies and procedures for managing student grades using Grades, the Gradebook, and also taking a look at the track student activities using class progress and intelligent agents. So now Barbara will be introducing the homepages.
Hi everyone. So we're going to begin with what your students first see when they enter your course. This is your course homepage. And a great way to help you manage your course is to design a homepage that's meaningful for both you and your students. So in the slides that follow, we're going to look at some strategies and recommendations to help you design a homepage that does exactly that. So when you or your students first click on a course from the main landing page in myCourses, you will see a page that is similar to what you see here. This is your course homepage. And each course homepage has a default navigation bar, a banner, and widgets. However, the default is not your only option. It's fully customizable depending on your preferences, and you have quite a bit of control over what your students see here. It's important to design a homepage with purpose and really think through what's most important within the context of what your students need to know or do. So consider limiting what you place on your homepage so that it only includes useful information. And also organize your page to help students find the resources they need when they need them. Because remember, the key here is to enhance the learning experience for your students. And some of the ways you can do this is by customizing your nav bar, your banner, and your widgets. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So a default banner image is applied to each course, and the purpose of the banner is to add visual styling and context to your course. However, the default may not always be appropriate, and I think back to when I met with an instructor who was teaching an anatomy course, and his banner image was that of a roller coaster, so something similar to what you see here. However, the default banner may sometimes be completely appropriate within the context of your course, and you may be very happy with it. And if that's the case, by all means, keep it as is. But it's good to know that you have the option to replace it by choosing a new image from the hundreds of images in the image bank. So as you can see here, we now have replaced our roller coaster with something a bit more appropriate for an anatomy course. Also note that you also have the option to create and upload a custom banner. So if you choose to create a custom banner, just keep in mind that it is the correct dimensions. And note that such things as dimension specifications and details on how to change your banner and any of the steps that we refer to during this presentation are posted as resources on the TLS website. Next, let's look at customizing your navigation bar. So what you see here is the navigation bar that is applied to all courses by default. So it contains the most commonly used tools such as content, Zoom, lecture recordings, discussions, assignments, and grades. Note that the last two items, so class list and course admin, are only visible to you and not to your students. You can change the nav bar to reflect which tools you'll be using in your course. So you'll likely want to keep most of these, so content, grades, Zoom, and lecture recordings, and then whichever engagement and assessment tools you're using. So assignments, discussions, maybe you're using quizzes or groups. So if you wish to customize the nav bar, you can click on the 3 blue dots that you see here on the screen that are highlighted, which will bring you to a page where you can easily delete and add tools. So for instance, if you're using the quizzes tool in your course, you will need to add it to your nav bar since it doesn't appear here by default. And this is important because students will not be able to access any assessments created using the quizzes tool if it is not added to your toolbar. So now you can see it's been added to our toolbar. So it's important to be selective about the links you have on your nav bar. So not only to add links to tools that may be missing, but also removing tools that you aren't using. And also the order they appear in is something to consider. We normally recommend that you place the most frequently accessed tools from left to right. So remember again, visual organization is important in helping your students find what they need quickly and easily. Another way you can customize your homepage is by changing your widgets. So each of the boxes that you see here on your right is called a widget. And the default widgets are announcements and the calendar widget. You can customize your homepage by changing these widgets as well as adding others. The widgets that you choose to include on your homepage should do two things. So they should ease navigation and they should help with communication. Help your students find information easily and quickly by providing them with methods to access frequently used course resources. And use widgets that help you share up-to-date course information and also help your students stay on top of course due dates. In the next few slides, we will be reviewing the widgets that we find really useful and highly recommend in helping you to manage your course. So the first widget that we recommend is the announcement widget. And again, this is one of your default widgets. It's a place to add messages that you would like students to see when they log into your course. And you can use the announcement widget to communicate important information to students, such as a welcome message at the start of the semester or extensions to an assignment, follow-ups from in-class discussions, links to new resources, course reminders such as an upcoming deadline, changes to an assignment. So you can see that there's many great uses for the announcements tool. Also, you're not limited to only using text in your announcements. You can add a variety of media such as images, links, you can embed a YouTube video, or you can even record a video message using your computer's webcam. This is a really great way to create a more personal touch or improve engagement with your students. You can also personalize your message by incorporating your student's name. So you can see here highlighted, it says, "Welcome, Barbara." And this can be done by using a simple variable called a replace string when editing your announcement. And again, instructions on how to do this can be found in the resources that we've shared with you on the TLS website. The next widget that we recommend is the calendar widget. This is another default widget. And this widget is a great way to help students stay on top of due dates and other important course deadlines, such as exams, assignment deadlines, etc. You can create your own custom events, such as a special presentation, or if you have a guest speaker, or if there's an upcoming holiday. And you can even schedule recurring events. Deadline dates that are set up in other myCourses tools. So if you have a due date for an assignment or a deadline for a quiz, these are automatically displayed in the calendar widget. Students will see up to 14 upcoming events or deadlines in this widget, and they can click on it to access the full calendar. Another really nice feature is that students can also subscribe to it with a preferred calendar software, so like Google Calendar, Outlook, iPhone, or Android Calendar. The next widget is the teacher profile widget. So this is a widget that is not one of the default widgets. The teacher profile widget is a custom widget that can be added to your homepage. And we really like this widget because it gives you a space to introduce yourself to your students, share your photo, a short bio, and even your social media details. However, this is entirely optional. It's a nice widget to add to make your course feel more personable for your students and give you more presence. When students feel like the instructor is more present in an online environment, they're likely to be more engaged. And the last widget that we would like to recommend is the visual table of contents widget. This is another custom widget that you can add to your homepage. We really like it because it allows for quick and easy access to your course content through visual and interactive tiles. So each of the little squares that you see here are referred to as tiles, and each tile represents a content module from your course. By clicking on one of these tiles, you're brought directly to a specific module, and each course module's title is displayed within a tile. There's also a little information button that can be clicked on to flip to reveal the module's description. Also, students can track their progress for each module by looking at a progress bar and the number of completed topics. So what you see here may be familiar to some of you who may have completed the myCourses Essentials course. You can see in this example, there are 6 modules that are represented, and then one of them is flipped to reveal the description for that specific module. You'll also notice that as a student, I can see that I've completed 50% of the content within each module, and it also displays how many topics I have visited. So we recommend this widget for courses normally with 8 to 10 content modules or less, because your homepage will begin to get quite long and will require much scrolling if you have a course with, say, 20 modules. So once you've finished designing your homepage and you've added some content to your course, the next step is to think about how you can manage your student grades. Luckily, myCourses has a great tool for this, and it's called the Grades tool. However, it's commonly referred to as the Gradebook. And so what is the Gradebook? Well, the Gradebook represents all the work you want to evaluate your students on in a course. It's where you can evaluate specific tasks such as assignments, quizzes, participation, presentations, exams, etc. In this example, you can see that I have 4 items that I will be evaluating, including an assignment, a midterm, a participation grade, as well as a final exam. You can also enter grades for individual items. If your gradebook is linked to other tools in myCourses, such as quizzes, assignments, or discussions, then your grading for these items will automatically flow into the gradebook. We find that students really appreciate when instructors use the grades tool because it allows them to see their progress in the course. And in the example you see here, this is a student's view of the gradebook. Here they can verify their grades on a specific assignment or test. They can also see additional feedback that the instructor may have included. And they can also view their final grade, but only once it has been released by the instructor. So why use the gradebook? Well, it does the math for you, which is really nice. So grades are automatically calculated. Multiple users can enter grades at the same time. This is especially handy if you have TAs in your course and they're helping you grade assignments. It's also really great for record keeping. You don't need to use Excel spreadsheets, emails, notes, etc. You can manage everything in one place. You can also manage exactly what students see. So you can decide what grade items you want students to see and when they see them by either hiding or making visible specific grade items in your gradebook. You can also decide whether they see their grades as a points value, as a percentage, or as letter grades, and whether they see the calculation method or logic behind their final grade. Also, final grades are not released to students automatically unless you explicitly publish them. You can also sort, filter, and view statistics. So you can view details about a class, a group, or a section's overall grades for your course. And these statistics include such things as the minimum grade, maximum grade, and even a graph showing the distribution of grades. And finally, myCourses makes it very easy to transfer your students' final grades directly to Minerva. There is an export to Minerva wizard available in the Gradebook tool. So the key takeaway here is that the grades tool is a huge time saver and also a great way to help you manage student grades in one place. As the instructor, you determine how to set up your gradebook to best reflect your approach to evaluation in your course. Before you start setting up your gradebook, first you need to take some time to think through the following 5 questions. So the first question is, which course activities do you plan to evaluate? So in this example, you can see that I have 3 quizzes, I have a group project, a written report, a participation grade, and a final exam. You can also, the next question to ask yourselves is, which grading system is most appropriate for your course? So you want to determine how the items you will be evaluating your students on contribute to their final grades. So will it be a weighted or points-based gradebook, for instance? And then how will points or weights be distributed? So in this example, my gradebook is weighted, and my 3 quizzes are scored out of 25 points each and are each worth 10% of the final grade. And then my group project is out of 100 points, but worth 20%. My written report also out of 100 points and worth 20%. Then I have my participation grade, which is out of 5 points, but worth 5% of the final grade. And then a final exam out of 100 points, worth 20% of the final grade. So you can see that all of my weights for each of these individual items add up to 100%. The next question to ask yourselves is, how will you handle ungraded items? So you can choose to drop ungraded items. In this case, if a student did not complete one of the 3 quizzes, for instance, it will be assumed that the grade for one quiz is excluded from the student's final grade calculations, so that the final grade will be inflated. Or you may choose to treat ungraded items as a 0. So this option will issue a 0 for anything that is not graded. If a student doesn't complete a quiz, they receive a 0. And finally, how will final grades be calculated? There are 2 options here that you can use. Either the final calculated grade, which means that the final grade is calculated by the gradebook. You cannot adjust the final grade without adjusting individual grade item scores. Or you can use the final adjusted grade, which allows you to manually change the final grade calculation without affecting item scores. So note that if you plan to export to Minerva, you will have to use the final adjusted grade as your final grade, because Minerva does not allow for decimal places. Therefore, you need to round your grades accordingly before exporting. So once you've thought through these questions, you can begin setting up your gradebook in myCourses. And you'll see a grades setup wizard page when you navigate to the grades tool for the first time. The grades setup wizard guides you through a series of 7 steps, including your calculation options, such as your grading systems and schemes, as well as the display options for you and your students, such as how many decimal places will be displayed, whether the grade students see will be in the form of a letter, a percentage, or number of points. So as a best practice, we highly recommend that you use the grade setup wizard before creating grade items in your gradebook, because making changes to a gradebook settings and calculation options after you begin tracking student grades can significantly affect existing data. So once you've completed your setup, you can begin creating your grade items, entering and managing your grades, and sharing this data with your students as you see fit. The gradebook is really a great way to help manage your student grades and keep an eye on your student progress throughout the term. Another way to track progress is via the class progress tool. And now I'll leave it to Teddy to continue, and he will explain more.
Thanks, Barbara. I'm just gonna switch the slide. I don't know if you're still hearing maybe a muffling There's somebody that's mowing the lawn out there, so hopefully it's not too recognizable. But well, I'm gonna go on. So if you hear a bit of a tinny, that's the noise. Okay, so you've set up your course in myCourses, curated or developed new material, created fixed and flexible activities, but how do you know if students are accessing the material and engaging in myCourses? So how can you keep students on track? What if you have a large class? So in this remote environment, we don't have as many cues to rely on, like students not showing up to class, their facial expressions. So how about letting myCourses do some of that analytics for you? So first we have the class progress tool. It's available for all instructors, either from the default navigation bars if you have that, if you haven't tweaked the navigation bar, or you can also view it from the course admin. And depending on what items you have made available in your course, you can see which areas students have been accessing and completing. So for example, in this view, I have added content visited, discussions, logins, and in the discussions, it shows the number of posts read, the threads created, replies posted, and it also shows the logins to the system and the grades obtained. You can also display, in addition, quizzes and assignment indicators, but you can only have 4 indicators that can be displayed at once. If you hover on each bar on the student, so if you hover on top of the grades, you can actually see a bit more details as well. What I find most interesting in this particular view is not much whether students have visited the content or logged into the system per se, but the discussions. You can tell whether students are spending time reading through the threads, but not necessarily authoring posts. So if you're planning on weekly discussion threads, this might be an interesting place to come back later and see. Just like all system type data, we have to interpret with a grain of salt. Not all students are the same. Some may spend more time interacting with the material in myCourses. Others would prefer reading the textbook. Others love to hang out in the discussion board. Others avoid it unless it has a grade attached to it. And even some students will click more if they know you're paying attention. So lots of activity in myCourses will not necessarily mean a successful student. This being said, if you look at the overall data and pattern, a student that does not access much material, has not read any postings, and is logging in frequently within the 2 weeks of the course, well, that might raise a flag. So if you have a large class, you may end up with several pages to navigate in class progress. What you could do instead is filter the class progress by groups. So if you know how to create groups in myCourses, I know some instructors already create groups of students for their TAs, and that way you can actually click on and filter by that group. And it can reduce the number of students per page, and even ask maybe your TAs to keep an eye on their group. Another interesting part about class progress is that you can drill down to the specific details for a particular student. So in this case, if you have a student asking a particular question on the course outline, and you can verify if they viewed the course outline before or after it was updated. So you can see here, it was visited twice, and the date and time it was last seen. Earlier, earlier we saw that login information of all students. This was pertaining to the logins to myCourses, not particular to the course, but you can actually drill down to see whether students have logged into your course particularly, and how many days in between each login. And finally, the one that was most interesting for me was you can take a look at the overall discussion activity. So again, the number of posts read, the threads created, and the replies posted. You can also open each thread here if you click down on the details and actually read the particular post that they've made. So you can actually view the quality of each post. So again, this is a great place to come back and see if you're assessing discussions. Okay, but what if you really have a large class of way more than 50 students? There's actually another tool that you can use in addition to class progress, which is intelligent agents. And intelligent agents will send an email based on a certain criteria that you set. So even though it is automated, you can personalize the email by adding variables such as the student's first name and the course title. It's the same way that Barbara was mentioning earlier for announcements. It's using those similar replace strings variables. So for example, of a use of an intelligent agent, you can flag out you or your teaching assistants when a student seems to be falling behind. So the criteria in this agent here would be to, if they haven't submitted the assignment by the due date. Another example is to set reminders to students. So the criteria here would be to, if they're not accessing the assignments or quizzes X number of days before the deadline, or not logging into the course for the past 7 days, students should probably be logging in at least every week, you can send these emails to remind them. But it doesn't always have to be about tracking students. You can also send a welcome email to all students that have accessed the course for the first time. I hear there are some instructors thinking about opening their courses ahead of time, and it might be an idea to send students that are accessing the courses early a personalized email informing them of what they might expect to see in this course if they are opening it early, and maybe even asking them to fill out an anonymous survey. What is your interest in this course? And finally, you can also automatically send encouraging email messages based on completion of activities. So an example would be, thank you for posting in the welcome discussion thread, or congratulations, you have completed half of the coursework. And that would be sent automatically without you having to remember to type it in. And it can be personalized as well. So we've talked about the tools that you can use to organize and communicate to your students. You will likely be making some tweaks and changes to your course. You can use class progress and the analytics that myCourses provide to make assumptions on students' behavior. But perhaps a more direct method to gather feedback is just to ask them directly. For example, you can create an anonymous survey where you can ask the simple questions of which particular activities are helping you learn. If there was one thing that you could change about this course, what would it be? In fact, I'd like to direct you to a resource on mid-course evaluation that will provide you different options to gather this feedback. It could be whether it's a survey, you can even do an anonymous discussion poll, or even use polling at McGill if that's something you already use. So we've given you a lot of information today. And the next step, I think Karen already mentioned about myCourses Essentials. It's a course that's in myCourses. You should already be added in there. And it's a self-paced tutorial that you can either browse through from beginning to end, or you can refer to when you're looking for a particular help in a particular area that you'd like to have. I would also like to remind you that this webinar is part of a series, so you can register to the others on the TLS website. But I would also like to mention is that these webinars are available to show you all the different options that you might consider, but please don't feel pressured that you must adopt it all. Please pick and choose the changes that will have the most impact for you, your students, and your course. And of course, something that you will continue to use beyond remote delivery. The recordings of the webinars are located on this website. And Barbara or Carolyn, if you don't mind posting this, this link, that'd be great, so that you can copy or click on it. And something that I'd like to point out is that you will also be able to stream the recordings from the links on the right-hand side and download the slides. And also, you will also find the resources by clicking on the plus beside the resource and readings. Just make sure to expand that. So this concludes the webinar portion on our end, but we would like to know, one, what is your most important takeaway from the session? And two, do you have any additional questions on what we covered today? Please type your answers in the chat tool. And I'd like also to add that if there are any questions that we cannot address today, we will review them and also answer them via the resources pages.
So Teddy, if it's all right with you, I'd like to interrupt for a minute. This is Carolyn.
Yeah.
You and Barbara might not be aware because I don't know how closely you're following the chat, IT has upgraded the knowledge base, and the links that we've been providing are not redirecting. We thought they were going to redirect, but they're not redirecting. So we've been putting in the chat that we're going to update the links on the website, and the link to that website is in the chat, and that's a valid link to our website. So we apologize for this. We didn't know that it was going to turn out this way, but we will certainly provide the updates on our webpage. There are 2 questions that came through the chat that I'd like to bring to your attention, and we'll do them one by one. If you could address how one can submit assignments to myCourses. That's the first question. I'll wait till you answer that, and then I'd like to come back with a second one that's pending. So how can you submit assignments to how can students submit assignments to myCourses?
Thanks, Carolyn. I'll take that one. That's addressed in our assessments webinar. It's through the assignments tool that students can submit their assignments. And so I'd recommend that you look at the page the last link that was posted for the webinars webpage on the TLS website. There are 2 recordings that we did, one this week and one last week, of that webinar that talks all about the assignments tool and this is the tool that students would upload assignments to. And so you can watch that, as well as there's many resources as well that, again, we'll be updating those links as soon as we can so that they point to the right spot on how you can do this as well in the McGill IT knowledge base.
Okay, great, thank you. So that was a question that Makoto had posed, and now this was one that Ross had posed. Can the Gradebook calculate the term's assignment grade using the top N out of M assignments?
Yes, I saw the question while Barbara was presenting, so I'll take that. And I think there was another question that followed that as well, is can you take the drop as well, the assignments? So you can definitely drop grades or count only the top X amount of assignments based on how the students got, and it's basically through categories in the gradebook. So you would create a category and put all these items within that category, and then you would just say exactly that, how many to drop, or take the maximum of those number. So that's pretty much it.
I also saw a question early on about the image bank that I just wanted to address, about where you actually find the image bank to change a banner image. And again, we have instructions on this that will update the link to, but it's very simple. It's literally on the image itself. So when you hover on your banner in the upper right-hand corner, I believe, you'll see 3 dots that appear. And if you click on those, you get access to the image bank, where you type in a search term, and then you can just scan the images until you find one that you like.
A couple of people have posed a question about myCourses being heavy and slow to load. I know that's not directly related to content in myCourses, but do you have any thoughts about response time in myCourses?
I think I'm thinking of the class progress in mind. For example, if you do have large classes, or you can also basically change the number of students that display per page. So if you find that it takes a long time for that page to load, for example, reducing the number of students would help, so that it doesn't try to load a whole list of students. But from my perspective, it depends as well, because I kind of like as well seeing the whole list of students. So that's why the option is there, so you can tweak the number of listed students per page. Hopefully that answers that. I was also taking a look at, there was, in terms of multiple group configurations in myCourses, definitely you can have different types of groups. So you can, for example, if you're thinking of creating presentations and you have groups for those presentations, then you have that category as a group. But you can also then also do the same thing that I was talking about earlier, is having groups for TAs. So yes, you can definitely have different types of groups, and folks are enrolled in different groups. The same person, same student enrolled in multiple groups for different reasons. And we do talk about it in terms of the assignments as well. So if you're going to take a look at the designing assessments, creating online assessments, you will find that we talk about that.
So this hasn't come up in the chat, but I know it's a question that I've received frequently from instructors, and it's regarding the discussions tool and linking it to the gradebook. So I know that one can actually grade discussions, and there's a simple way to do that. So maybe you could talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, that's one of the really nice features about the gradebook in myCourses. So if you're using there's a few tools that you can be using that link directly to the gradebook. So discussions is one of them, as Carolyn mentioned. There's also quizzes and assignments. So if you're using any of these tools and your students submit to them, and then you grade within one of these three tools, you can link them to your gradebook. And what this means is that you basically create a grade item in your gradebook, and then you just, there's a setting where you just link the two. So you don't have to enter in your grades twice, which is very nice. They're automatically just transferred from discussions or assignments or quizzes directly to your gradebook. So that's a very nice feature, so that you're just putting in the grade once and then it goes directly into your gradebook.
So that means, for example, if I'm reading my students' posts, as I read them, I might have my marking criteria next to me, and as I read them, I can just sort of say, yeah, 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 no, 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 and then I can put a number in a box, and that automatically goes into the gradebook? That's exactly right. Okay. Yeah. And then another question, again, not in the chat today, but that's come up in other contexts, is about releasing the grades. So they can be hidden until you want students to see them. Can you say something about that, please?
Yes, that's right. So you can hide the items in your gradebook so that they're not visible to students, and then you can release them whenever you're ready to do so. Also, your final grade, as I think I mentioned earlier, is not, by default, it's not released to your students. You have to actually go in and release your final grade to your students at the end of the term whenever you're ready. So all of these options are under your control. And I think you can release selectively by assignment too. So yes, like exactly. If I have like one essay, I can release the grades for that one essay, but I might not be ready to release the grades for a second essay. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, you can pick and choose. It's quite granular, you know, exactly which assignment, which quiz, which discussion activity you're releasing the grade for.
Something that I'd like to add as well to parallel that is if you're wondering if it's showing to students, is you can add that grade to yourself. In the gradebook, you'll see that you're actually a row as if you're a student as well. So if you add that grade there and then you preview it as a student, you will be able to see whether that grade shows up or not, like the other students. So take a look at the preview student option. Yeah, that's really a helpful tool. So there's no mystery about what students see. Can you say something about the gradebook and thinking with Excel? Sure. So it is possible if you do prefer to work in Excel, that's also a possibility. And then you can import your Excel or CSV file into myCourses. So it's possible to do it that way. It's also important. It's also possible to export your gradebook as well into Excel or CSV file. And that, I imagine, is something that's really helpful, particularly with large classes. Yes, yes. And again, all of these instructions on how to do all of this are all in the IT knowledge base. We'll make sure that all the links on the TLS webinars page are updated to include these items as well. And we'll also be sure to update the links that are currently there.
I don't see any more questions coming through the chat. I think I'm just going to make a comment about the banner. I used to have a lot of fun playing with that banner image, and sometimes I would put inspirational quotes related to the course topic. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an image. You can also create the image of text. And I used to change that every semester and have a different inspirational quote for students taking my courses.
Yeah, absolutely. You can have a lot of fun with it. You can be as creative as you want to be.
Okay, so we have another question that's come in. If one revises a grade on an assignment, will it automatically be updated in the gradebook?
I can take that in. When you update when you change the feedback in the assignment tool, you have to do something like save draft and then publish, and that's the thing that you have to click to publish so that it pushes it to the gradebook. So yes, it should be automatically updated.
And I'll say something else about related to the gradebook. So when you provide students with feedback on the assignments that they've submitted, of course, that grade that you associate with any comments will go into the gradebook. But I also really appreciated that I could track to see if students were actually accessing the feedback that I provided. So I've provided feedback to students directly in myCourses. Could be comments, written comments, or even audio. I did a lot of audio feedback, and using that tracking tool, like I was able to see if students were actually accessing the feedback. And I thought that was really helpful, because I could go back to class and say, you know, if they were doing revisions of work, I could say, well, I noticed that you haven't read the feedback yet, and you probably should do that for the revision. Okay, we've got another question that's come in. What if you've already published it once? So this is related to the gradebook and updating the grade.
Yeah, I think for myself, I have to triple check it. I'm pretty sure it does, but if you don't mind me taking it back and then finding the link, but I'm pretty sure when I update it, it should push it. So I'm gonna just take in your I'm gonna guess that it's your first dot last name, and then maybe I'll email you afterwards to confirm once it's done. Hold on a second.
Okay, and Grace has provided some additional information that if you click on save, it will update.
There you go. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and I remember that too from my own experience. Yeah. So yeah, that will work. You can update it. So we've just got a couple of minutes left. Maybe we will just thank everybody for participating today. And again, we're so sorry about the links. Yeah, we'll tend to that on our website, but really we weren't prepared for that. We had understood that there would be a redirect. So Barbara, Teddy, do you have any last comments?
There was one more about about addressing the students having trouble accessing myCourses, or if the content is heavy. Of course, keeping the files small as instructors, it would help for students that have the low bandwidth, but also making sure that they reach out to IT if it's something that's particular to a couple students versus in general. It's possible that they have something else that's happening that we don't know about. So definitely have them reach out directly to IT so they can help them out directly. And I posted it earlier in the chat. It's itsupport@mcgill.ca, or their phone number 514-398-2398. That's about it. I think I've covered it all. Thanks so much for attending, guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks so much for your great questions and for your feedback. We really appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll be stopping the recording, and this recording, the video recording will be posted to our website.